Again, hello. Let's have a look. New viewers so far, but we'll wait about a bit. Check in and there we go. There's a few people. So, I am going to be for crying out loud, this thing is so slow. Anyway, so I've been looking at obviously this act over here, but I mean we can read all the way through it, but some of the sort of procedural elements are a little bit tedious, and you know they don't sit right next to the good bits. Don't sit right next to is sharing. I'm going to be reading from. Hold on a second. I should actually open this. I'm going to be reading from the Act and its implications, and then were noticed by the fellows at. My mic sounds bad. Balls. Let's have a look. How does my mic sound bad? I'm using the good one. It says. No, so I'm going to look at. We're going to look at a little summary of the Act, and then I'm going to. Maybe you can't hear anything. What balls? Come on. Audio, mic volume. Did that make a difference? Let's hope so. Yeah. Okay. Is it better? Is it better? Because I mean, this is the maximum I can do at the moment. Unless I talk directly into the microphone like this, in which case it's just going to be ridiculous. Crackling. Wait, still. Oh, you know what it might be? I have right outside my window. I have a lot of cicadas, and depending on how Okay, let's try again. Please tell me. That should be right now. If I use the laptop mic, you can hear nothing. Okay, I promise you. Is that any better? Fixed. There we go. Grand. I don't know what the problem was, but according to... Yeah, there we go. So now we have wasted 3 minutes pissing about with technology, which is about to be taken away from us by the decline of civilization. So hopefully not, though. I don't think any of this is guaranteed. I think there's a good chance we might still make it and be fine and so on. So what I'm going to do, let's have a look. What do come on? Here we go. There we go. So now I wrote this. I've been absolutely, snowed under with work because I've been working on this enormous project for the Afrikaner Foundation, which is the foreign outreach branch for the Solidarity Movement. So it's run by Ernst Roots, and they've been planning for a few months to do a sort of foreign tour, UK, EU, US, the usual suspects. And I mean, look, there's a going on. I mean, I'm sure some of you have seen that interview between Stephen Grootes and Ernst van Zyl. If you haven't, you should go and check it out because, nothing is guaranteed to make you quite as angry as that. I mean, Stephen Grootes, right off the bat, he just lies through his teeth. So Donald Trump hadn't suspended any sort of aid to South Africa, but in a targeted sense, what he'd done is he'd liquidated US aid. So that means like the PEPFAR program goes, right? So Stephen Grootes drags Adams van Zyl, the spokesperson for AfriForum, which is, the sort of legal advocacy and security body, sort of like the Department of Justice for the parallel Afrikaans government. So he's the spokesperson for AfriForum, and they decide that I don't want to read I'm with you. Reading legislation. I do this shit all day. It sucks. It really sucks. Anyway, so Grootes and van Zyl on, and the first thing Grootes opens with, he says, well, Donald Trump has just cut the AIDS, budget, and, people are going to die now. Isn't that what you wanted when you went over there lobbying? It's like, what the hell are you trying to do? I mean, this man is he's a slime. He's an absolute slime, that obese graying weasel. Anyhow, now Adams van Zyl showed much more restraint than I would have. I am very glad, for the sake of the organization and my own reputation, that I didn't end up in his position as spokesperson, because I'm way too emotional. I can't stand that stuff. I'd have given him both barrels, which would have been entertaining, but not a good look for the organization. Anyway, so no, all of that shit aside, what's basically happened is Donald Trump has liquidated US aid because, and you should check out Mike Benz on this, BENZ, like the motor car. So Mike Benz has done some extremely good exposition on what US aid has been up to, but the broad strokes are that it has been used for regime change, political influence, corruption all across the world, and that the aid programs that they add are sort of window dressing for what's really going on. And their contribution to the budget, I mean, the headline figures say that this program in South Africa under PEPFAR, which is a sub-program of USAID, dealing with AIDS medical treatment, they say it sort of dealt with like, it accounted for 17% of our AIDS budget. But I think that, this is a drop in the ocean. We've got an enormous, relatively speaking, we've got a very large medical programs in South Africa that are state funded, and much like the state government, that money is just a headline figure. You don't know how much of that sort of reaches the ground. I mean, the United States under the previous regime, they were doing a lot of influence of various kinds. Now Donald Trump has liquidated USAID. He has not liquidated the National Endowment for Democracy yet, which is the foreign influence body for the CIA. They indirectly fund several of our newspapers, including the Mail and Guardian and the Daily Maverick. And I say indirectly because it's not like it says NED on them, although there's a sort of rotating, there's a revolving door of employment with that department and Mail and Guardian. And then you've got like a former US diplomat who's on the team at Maverick, that Brooks guy, sort of sneering New England drawl he's got. These guys, they're not great. So I'm not a fan of foreign influence. I'm wary of what Donald Trump might do if he calls for economic sanctions. It'd be pretty bad because we kind of need the economy to function. It's kind of on its last legs. The other aspect that Hugo Kruger brought to my attention, which I think he should be given credit for, because for some reason I was on snooze. I've had real sleep deprivation, so my brain's been on the fritz for a while. I think last night's the first night of proper sleep I got for a long time, because I've had a lot of things going on. But he pointed out that even if you just target the ANC leaders, it's going to increase sort of political scapegoating at home and accelerate the political process. That's certainly possible. I know that it hasn't worked with Zimbabwe, and it hasn't worked with Iran, and it hasn't worked with Russia, and it does tend to harden. It does tend to harden people's resolve. But I imagine there are a lot more diplomatic sort of efforts that people could make in order to pressure South Africa at making us become something like, something close to persona non grata. It's kind of what you want. But I don't think you need the sort of firm touch that was used in the old regime. I mean, look, modern South Africa it's a bit squishy, it's a bit soft, but we're heading to a situation where we're facing a trifecta here. So the same one that we were facing in old South Africa, where you have a border war and local resistance and foreign diplomatic sort of opprobrium. Now that combination will do you in if you unless you decide to go bananas. But ANC might still decide to go bananas. I mean, I think the centrists. I mean, I know that they don't seem very centrist, but they are centrists for what the ANC is. The centrists kind of own control there. So, yeah, thank you. All right, see you. Bye-bye. No, my mother came down to sort of help out because we got swamped, because I was doing two jobs at once over the past couple of months, and she stayed to help out with the kids and so on. So that was nice. It's been nice to have her around. Okie dokie. So where was I? Okay. The thing is, we have a war with Rwanda right now that's sort of not official, but it's like it's starting to get pretty intense. People asking why the body bags are coming back. It could get a bit stupid. I mean, we signed a mutual defense pact with the DRC, which is a bloody basket case. Why you'd do that, I don't know. It'd be like, yeah, it's kind of the South African equivalent of including Ukraine in NATO in like 5 or 6 years ago. Anyway, they don't make cups of tea big enough. Where was I? Right. Okay. Land expropriation. Let's get down to it. So, look, the government's under a lot of pressure, and they've been trying to squeak through these reforms. They've used the DA as cover so that they can push this through. And so here's my little description of it. So everyone sort of says, the constitutional protected, it's very sort of like limited in scope, but you've got to remember that the constitutional protections against expropriation they're only really two, substantially speaking, right? If you examine section 25. So it says that it has to be approved by a court. The expropriation without compensation has to be approved by a court, and it cannot be on an arbitrary basis. Now, what they mean by arbitrary is just, well, I want that, I'm going to take it. You can't do that legally. You have to have a reason. Now, you can manufacture reasons. You can have members of your party go and do some kind of land invasion, and then you say, geez, guys, these people really need housing, and we can't remove them. So, why don't you hand over your farm? Now, that's happened to a couple of people. I mean, in Cape Town as well. When I was doing that land reform study for Sakeligha like a year ago, it came across a couple of cases like this. Now, in those cases, they have to pay market value for the property, and no, they don't. See, here's the thing. One of the criteria in the bill, they say that they are allowed to calculate the compensation against the necessary development investment on the land. Now, think about what that means. Let's say you send a group of ANC cadres and their families to knock up a shack farming project. I mean, if you don't know what shack farming is, that's a couple of thugs go and stake out a piece of land, right? And then they rent out the plots to people they bring in from wherever, and they extract a rent from them. So it's that's the kind of land grab that's fairly common in South Africa. Now, there are other ways that this kind of happens. I mean, a lot of the squatter camps in South Africa are also the fault of the farming community. A lot of selfish tits over there. In fact, it's fairly common for farmers to bring in seasonal labor and then dump each year's new labor cohort into the squatter camps. Because if you keep them on the farm longer than their tenure, then there's a law that comes into effect called the Ester Act, which gives them the ability to basically remain as long as they like, and then they own that piece of accommodation that they stayed in. the ESTA Act and there's something called the PI Act, Provincial Illegal Eviction Act. Now, if you read the language of the Provincial Illegal Eviction Act, it says it talks about tenants, but our legal system has decided for some perverse reason to interpret to mean anyone, whether they're legally allowed to be there or not. So you can invade a property, and if you stick around for a couple of days, no one can remove you without a long, lengthy court case. And by the time the court case is wound up, because it's like a couple of years in some cases, by that time you'll have tenure, or you'll have families and old ladies there, and then shame, pity for them. Can't you just let them keep the stolen goods? So there is this kind of logic going on. So this is kind of the situation. The scale of land invasions in the country is absolutely insane. Now, the thing is that there is still it's very difficult to remove these people, but you can still do it. And if you're vigilant, you can prevent them from getting a legal foothold on property. There's some very inventive lawyers in Johannesburg that I contacted regarding building hijackings, because what will happen is you get people come in with AK-47s, chase everyone out, bring their people in. And the thing is, if you don't act very quickly, usually in the first 24 hours, it's almost impossible to remove these people, because you're legally mandated to provide alternative housing for them. That's the real standard. So you can just steal anything, you can get stuff out of it. It's an extraordinary system. So. But this guy's figured out a way that if you get you get an order in camera ex parte from a judge saying this is very urgent, you get a midnight ruling with apparently a silk has to be present for this to function. I'm not sure why. I don't understand the little cultural ins and outs of the legal profession. Apparently, it's not statutory that you have to do this, but this is how it's done. You bring in your advocate, you bring in your silk, you sit in the judge's quarters, and you say, okay, we need these people out, and we need you to exclude the police because they're not trustworthy and they're not responsive. So they use the court sheriff to go and to contract a private security company to remove these guys. And he says that if you catch it in the first 24 hours, success rate is 100%. But that's like, your response rate has to be amazing. So then this is your land reform process. This is your sort of land grab system. And there's thousands of these things every year, everywhere around the country. I fished around on Twitter to try and see if someone could send me that glorious thread of all of those land invasions, but I have not yet been blessed. So yeah, unfortunate. But this is the context of the bill, is that there is this problem of land invasions that is happening, and now there's an administrative mechanism for justifying for creating a situation where this is streamlined by removing the budgetary impact. So you just come up with some kind of budget estimation for the, and I shall say this is a very important point, legally mandated informal settlement upgrading policy. You just say, oh, shucks, you got all these people on your land, we can't remove them, we have to upgrade them, oh, it's going to be so expensive, we're just going to have to take your land, I'm sorry. So this, people who say don't compare it to Robert Mugabe, I mean, we've got exactly the same system now. We've got exactly the same legal framework in place. Now, people also talk about you can expropriate land if someone's using it for speculation. How can you tell if someone's using that land for speculation? So that's an important question. If you're renting out the property, does that no longer count as speculation? So they're saying, well, you have to use the land. How long do you have to not use the land before they can take it? Unknown. What about if you let your field lie fallow in order to recover for purposes of regenerative agriculture? I don't know. So, and then they can say, they've also got sort of, there's also another bill that was passed recently for the Agricultural Department, which, Mr. Pai over there in agricultural department, John Steenhuisen, cheering on this agricultural bill. It basically allows the minister to dictate any aspect of land use at all. So they can tell farmers how to do what anywhere. They can set all kinds of targets. Basically allows you to have a kind of centrally planned agricultural economy. Now, what that allows you to do is, you can decide exactly what kind of practices are allowed. And you can say, well, no, you're not allowed to let your land lie fallow. No, regenerative agriculture is not scientifically consensus. You have to do it this way, whatever. It doesn't matter. If they decide you only need this much land for that many cows, sorry, you've got too much land you're not using. So there's there are a lot of these different ways in which all of these new laws intersect. I think the other thing is that the massive fines that can be imposed for doing any kind of agricultural process that is not approved by the minister is just, it's eye-watering. It's, tens of millions, 10 million rand. That's the fine. So there is one bit of good news that's very interesting. So you've got to remember the president has an advisory body on land reform, and so it includes a couple of really skirkelijk characters. So not skirkelijk, but skirkelijk. There's Ruth Hall, who's this very sort of condescending lady from this. She's a communist from this department, like an agrarian communist, sort of third worldist Maoist kind of vibes, right? And she comes from the University of the Western Cape, but she studied at Oxford. So she's not dumb. She's quite bright. She worked with this woman called Ada Mengistu, who I do wonder if she's not family of the dictator from Ethiopia who started the famine there through his land reform processes. Ha ha ha. So, because he went and died in exile in Zimbabwe. And the work that Ruth Hall has been doing as an advisor to the president, and before she was advisor to the president, but now she is, included a lot of work in Zimbabwe, and she praised that land reform process and said, well, we wouldn't have all of this chaos if the government just confiscated the land, more directly and more orderly process. So her sort of thing is like, there's this hunger for land, blah, blah, blah. But she doesn't really mean anything she says. She just likes hurting Afrikaners. I can't tell if it's because she's one of those old English sort of communist types who just really hates the Boer and enjoys watching them suffer, or whether there's another ethnic component, or whether it's just she's bananas. But clearly there's a really sadistic edge to the way she communicates pretty much anything. So Anyway, the other big advisor that you need to bear in mind is someone called Tembeka Ngukantobi. Sorry, I slightly mispronounced that. Ngukantobi, haha. He's one of the big shots who's busy helping South Africa prosecute Israel at the ICC at the moment. He's the guy with that big sort of like untidy salt and pepper afro going on. He's kind of serious business. He wrote an article a few years ago, in 2018, called "The Prophecy of Makanda Must Be Fulfilled." Now, Makanda, if you don't know, is a 19th century devil, and I'm not using this word euphemistically. I mean this in a very literal and theologically defined sense. Devil worshipping cultist and prophet from the sort of latter days of the border wars in the Eastern Cape. And early on he was sort of a rival for Chief's attentions with the first serious Christian Xhosa prophet. What's his name? Is it Nsikana? I think his name is. Just really look at this up. Nsikana. Yeah, Nsikana. Anywho. So the two of them sort of go head to head. One of them sort of says, well, no, we're Christians now, blah, blah, blah. And the other one says, no, he failed to get quite as good an audience, and but over time he did develop his own following, and he decided that we must get rid of the white man, we must the usual shit. But he says we worship this creature called Ndali Dipu, which sort of meant like Lord of the Deeps, who's Utiko, which was originally the creator god in their sort of original theology, pagan theology, was used by Nsekana as the name of God, the creator, in for Christians. So he used that name. That's why they use it today. And then what Makanda did is he went and he went by the nickname Mchele, he's a left-handed one. So he says, okay, no, we were, that's the white god. We're worshipping the black god, the Lord of the Deeps. Follow me. All of the white man's bullets will turn to water, and it will sweep them into the sea, and blah blah blah. And then he gets defeated at Grahamstown, and a Khoi contingent joins the British to relieve them, and they decimate the raiders and imprison their leaders on Robben Island. Then Makanda tries to swim to freedom and drowns in the ocean. So if any prophecy has backfired, it's that one. But our president's advisor on law of land reform, Tembeka Nkokantobi, here it is. He, if you go to so this is linked in the description, this article, but there's this link, this little red link over here, the official legal stance. It links to a Word document that's the man's actual legal opinion on land invasion. Now, there's one of the most important caveats in the whole reform program is buried in there, because he mentions that because of the constitutional validity of international law in South Africa, there is a prohibition on the expropriation of foreign-owned property. So if you want to really safeguard your property, get a family member who is living overseas to place your property in, to become the owner of your land, and there's no way they can expropriate it. So there's, people are mentioning other prophets who are very interesting, but it's kind of pertinent because so Nguka and Toby writes this article. Sorry, I got distracted there by going back to the first point, but he wrote an article called, on how his prophecy must be fulfilled. White people must be swept into the ocean. And he talks about the border wars there. Now, the reason the border wars happen is that the Xhosa could simply not stop raiding, stealing, raping, and murdering farms outside of their territory. And no matter how many times we tried to do diplomacy, they wouldn't put their arms down. So we started doing punitive expeditions, and eventually we had to pacify them completely and bring them to heel as a colony. So this is the logic behind this. And they say, well, we want payback for that. And I sort of think, well, I'm not really, I don't care. Take it if you can, leave it if you can't. We've all got our sort of corner to box. So this is the color of the advice that the president's getting. Woman who wants to have Zimbabwe happen here, and a man who wants Haiti to happen here. Okay, so these are the people that the president is listening to. Now, he's also a very pragmatic man, and I'm going to let my dog in because she wants to come and lie on my feet. Hold on. Hello, sausage. Come on, Frida. Oh, all three of you now. Come on. Okay, we've got the whole menagerie in here. Shh. Calm down. Thank you. Anyway. Where was I? Commies. So, Joe Blackson. Yes, commies. So, but look, Ramaphosa is a very pragmatic man. He's very good at negotiating. You watch how he managed to sneak so many interesting clauses into the constitution during the negotiation process. The man's pretty shrewd. Look, he's a nasty, corrupt bugger. And as far as I understand, he is. I mean, look, I've asked a number of people, and I've looked at a bit of circumstantial evidence that is public. If you look up him and Rolf Mayer's relationship with Sidney Frankel, the sort of suggestion by a lot of contextual information is that Ramaphosa is into little boys. So another reason to detest the man if you didn't already have enough. But anyway, the where are we? Okay, so one thing to remember, because the president's advisors, they're happy for Zimbabwean genocide, which means the president likely is. But the president understands the gradualism. I mean, it was Mario Ambrosini. If you want to know where that sort of frog boiling quote comes from, it comes from this Italian-American legal advisor to Chief Buthelezi of the IFP, who was there for most of the transition process. And he recorded this quote. And then shortly afterwards, he died. He had committed suicide while he was dying of terminal cancer. So he's just sort of like, well, he wrote all this stuff while he was fracking. Poor bugger. So that frog boiling quote that's so famous that, the frog will jump out if you heat the water too quickly. You got to give it a tick. And then the number he quotes when he was talking about this book was 25 years. And it's remarkable because 25 years, almost exactly, since the ANC took power, Ramaphosa announced the implementation of the National Democratic Revolution's second phase. Now, the two phases over here, the one phase is that you've got to take power and control of the levers of the state and economy. Now, they've mostly done that. Now, Mandela's sort of efforts were taking control of the basic levers of the state. Mbeki's job was taking control of the private sector, and that they've done that to a large extent. The BEE system has really tied together the big business and the state. And you notice how very, very gentle, if any, their criticism is of any ANC policy. It's because all of these corporations are actually deeply enmeshed with the ANC's leadership structure. And they don't just apply cadre deployment for, if anyone doesn't know what cadre deployment, it's like party loyalists get put in places. They don't just use cadre deployment to pick people for the civil service and the judiciary. They actually use it for organizing BEE deals. So you get this sort of picture here where the whole structure is it's like Gleichschaltung, the term that the Nazis used for the coordination of the economy under the National Socialist Party. It's a very, very similar process to what the ANC sort of does down here, except, So, and naturally, much like the German Jews, there are a few white South Africans who seem to be under the impression that it would be good for the harmonizing of the races to go with the radical nationalist majoritarians. What people forget is that there's a character called Max Naumann who ran an organization called the Association of German National Jews. And they supported Adolf Hitler right up until about 1934, like a year after they took power. And they were like, hang on, guys, you're going a bit far. And then by that point, they're like, yeah, we don't want to hear it, into the concentration camp. So they stuffed Max Naumann, despite him being a loyalist to the Nazis for a long time. Well, now you're quetching a bit too much. We put you in the box. And he died of cancer there in 1939. So, they hadn't yet become extermination camps. That, I think, happens like, what, in 1940, 41? I'm not sure. Anyway, you've always got a minority of people who will act against the interests of their own kind. And, what's remarkable about South Africa, Black South Africa in particular, is how few people are like that amongst Black people. So if you look at the voting statistics, actually, I've got that on a bloody graph. I can show you that. Ha ha ha. Because I have my latest report, which I did. I'm not going to show it all to you because it still has to be, checked and verified. But it has a couple of graphs in it that I can show you that are Where is it gone? Oh yeah, window, not. StreamYard. There we go. That's the one. So let me see. Let's go. I love hyperlinking. It's institutions, parliament. There we go. So here's your national election results for the past 30 years. Isn't that grand? So you can see I had to plot the ANC on the right-hand graph over here. As you can see, the green marks just touching down to the 40% there, and then 66% here. So whereas everyone else, if I didn't do that, then all of these squiggles down here just be like a flat line on the bottom. So I have to plot the ANC on another graph, on another axis. Sorry, that's just how it goes. But if you break it down differently and you look at them as ethnic blocks, so the green now is the ANC and its splinter parties. The red is the Zulu IFP, Zulu Nationalists and IFP. Well, they've halved over the past, 30 years, but part of that is due to MK. So we'll see how that works. If MK starts falling apart or something, we might see them nudge back up to over 10% nationally. So liberal and minoritarian, what you can see over here in the above graph is that as the Nationalist Party collapses, they get replaced by the DP and they merge, right? Of course, at this point here, somewhere around here, I can't remember exactly what year, all of the NP members decide, no, it's later, I think it's 2006. They decide they don't like working with the Liberals and they go off and join the ANC. So that I thought that's a hilarious situation. Not a lot has been written about that period for some reason, but it's for just understanding people's political psychology, that's a very, very interesting point. But that's besides the point. Oh, by the way, this is the cover for that report. Nice and smart. I love doing chroma filters on photographs. It's always great. And then where are we? We are here. Oh, sorry. I was looking at something that you can't see, which is silly. Let me just show you the cover because I'm proud of it. It looks tidy. Hey, what do you think? What do you think? Look at that. Nice. Not excellent, but pretty good. So let's go back to Parliament. Nice hyperlinked. This thing is. You've got your NP, you've got your DA, you've got your Vryheidsfront Plus, which they're a tiny party, but I support them for the single reason that they may actually be decisive in the Western Cape in coming elections, provided that certain things happen. Now I'm going to speak out of turn here because I'm not really worried about a future in the party, and I've gotten quite angry with certain features. Now, my guy in the party pretty much is Corné Mulder. He's the one I like. He's the guy I respect. Who I don't like and don't respect at the moment, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, gentlemen, is Pieter Groenewald. I know he's popular with people because he looks like the groot boss is back in town in the prisons. But the dynamic in the party, as I understand it, and I'm not going to sort of use any names besides those two, because both of those men are standing for leadership election. They're standing for leadership election on the 22nd of February. This is how they're going to decide whether or not they're going to be able to make big decisions, like changes of policy, leaving the GNU, ground strategy, everything. And it's a big one because the two men differ substantially. Corné Mulder is shrewd and he's very sly, but he's very, very patient, patient enough to frustrate the hell out of anyone. But he is still very, very principled. Now, there's a certain gentleman who joined the DA a year or so ago, and he was explaining a reasonably high-level guy, and he was explaining that the reason he didn't join the Vryheidsfront Plus was not because he didn't like the party or respect its values, but because Pieter Groenewald was so magnificently unpleasant to be around that he just couldn't do it. And he was insulted by the man's arrogance. Corné Mulder has never had that impact on anyone. Everyone who ever met him says he's extraordinarily polite and considerate and he pays attention when you're talking. Now, the sort of quiet demeanor doesn't make you look like a big strong man, but he knows what he's doing. In the Western Cape, they've gotten into hot water because, and this is Corné Mulder's territory, they've gotten into hot water because they've turned their back on ANC DA coalitions where there are hung municipalities, right? I don't know. Everyone respects Mulder. No one is. I haven't met anyone who's got like. Well, that's not true. There's one local fellow who sort of is wary of him because he was sort of shocked by how quickly Mulder could organize something, and it sort of spooked him, saying, "Oh no, he's." People get a bit paranoid when they see someone who's good at political maneuvering. But anyway, so Mulder. The thing is, he managed to get Cape Independence on the ballot, on the ticket for the party, and he managed to retain support in this province at almost the same level, while everywhere else in the country they lost 30%, which shifted over to the DA in the hopes that they could smash the ANC. Right? So he's the man. He's the man with the plan. And when it comes to local municipal corruption, we've got the Western Cape Freedom from Plus guys are very, very serious. I mean, the amount of abuse that Johan van Schalkwyk of Swellendam has been taking for being firm on the DA's corruption in that area and their abuse of their powers is extraordinary. The amount of harassment that he's gotten, right? And Mulder has been good at looking after him and making sure that he has the political cover he needs until recently, because the DA has sort of declared when the first problems popped off in Oudtshoorn, they were shutting out all of their smaller coalition partners and just working straight with the ANC, despite the ANC being on the other side of the council benches. So, as usual, smochel, lots of corruption. I could tell you many stories. I've written about them before. But trust me, the ANC is corrupt. They never, ever, ever, ever punish a corrupt member. They will punish you for blowing the whistle. They will never punish a corrupt member. So not unless he's caught red-handed by the police, that is the threshold. Then, oh my goodness, we didn't know anything. But they'll burn millions going after people who blow the whistle. It's extraordinary. Look up Johan Brammer. See what his story is in out there in B2 municipality. That's a hell of a smochel, that crowd. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. The basic point is Freedom Front Plus is part of this minoritarian cluster, right? They are, as far as I'm concerned, they have an important role to play. They don't represent a very large amount of the electorate, but the DA does not have a very large governing margin in the Western Cape. Now, arguably, because they're so pernicious in their nature, so cowardly, so left-leaning, and so venal, they could very well betray the entire province to the ANC should they fall below 50%. Yes, this is a gamble, right? But I think that it's a gamble worth taking, because there literally is not enough time to faff about. And if we can get Cape Independence on a referendum ballot, then we will have a home run. And it really doesn't matter if the referendum is legal or illegal. If we have the will to push it through and make sure that it is done, then we will have sufficient legitimacy to press the button and get going. But we have to wait until 2029, when Trump will no longer be in the White House, and hope that J.D. Vance or whoever else takes his place is going to be similarly inclined in terms of bugger the rules, this makes sense kind of an attitude. But it remains to be seen. I mean, if I was an American, what I would be doing is I'd be supporting Cape Independence, Zulu independence, and get the cooperation of the Mozambican government so that they can stabilize conditions, however they get that done. And then we just shut off all 4 major ports to South Africa if they don't want to provide rights to minorities. It's simple as that. So have I ever thought of making an X account? I have an X account. I've got like just shy of 15,000 followers on there. So yeah, if you look me up, Robert Digan on Twitter at Umarobane, then it's going to come up. Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I talk a lot of shit over there. Where else am I? Okay, so as you can see, there's been no change in 30 years. Okay? Nothing changes. Black people vote for black nationalists. Minorities vote for minoritarians. This is how it is. All right? This is how it is. There's unfortunately no other situation. And if you look at the research of Gareth van Onselen of Victory Research, who's heavily relied upon by the DA for polling, we're the most accurate election polling company that were looking at South Africa in the 2024 election. His statistics say only 4% of black people vote for the DA. 4%. How many do you think vote for the other little liberal and minoritarian parties? I don't think any significant quantity. So let's say 5% of the black population vote for minorities. This is the situation. No one is willing to entertain even the most generous progressive liberal model you could imagine. They only entertain systems that give them racial privilege and threaten the livelihoods of minorities. Defender Puma brings up a very interesting point. Surely the ratio of the races has changed. That is true. Now, there are two extraordinary statistical coincidences that I'm going to bring up at this point that have persisted for a very long time in South Africa. So for 30 years, the rate of actually, maybe I should bring up my whole electoral chart so that I can explain this stuff, because I am basically just going to rinse everything here. Every point that helps you understand the political system, you're going to get it now. Screw this. So here we go. Here is the voter participation rate up until 2021. I didn't finish the 2024 numbers because hell's bells. Voter participation lines charted on the left in absolute numbers. Yeah, that's how many numbers. And dotted lines over here are ratios charted on the right in percentage points. Okay, so there are two ground figures you have to remember. There's registered voters, there is voting age population, and then there is turnout. Those are the three basic numbers. Okay, so turnout is in blue. Oh, fuck, I've got to share it. Hold on. Stop screen, share. Gosh. They don't want you to just switch screen. You've got to have this whole... come on. Maybe I should just, maybe I'm just going to share my whole screen, and then, because, this is just going to make life easier. Okay, because there's nothing I have to go on. There we go. So now you're going to see, wow, there we are. But now let me go here. Here we go. This is South African election tables. Now I've been maintaining this lot for a while. So you can see there's the national election results. There's the ethnic blocks. Here's KZN by total results and ethnic blocks. I mean, it's really kind of cool, hey? So you can do cool shit as well. So I've got some of the cities in order to demonstrate this sort of ebony ceiling where like everyone entertained the DA once, and then after they looked at what the DA was like in coalitions, they're like, yeah, nothing's changing, bye-bye. So this happens in every single metropolitan center in the country. Yeah, Gauteng. Anyway, voter turnout. You can notice something about voter turnout over here. Come on, load. Where have you gone? There we go. So it's very, very low. So despite the voting age population increasing and the registered voters increasing moderately, your turnout of the total voter age population has dropped to just 22%. Oh, sorry, 29%. So think about what that means. You got who is being an absentee voter here? Well, I'll tell you, the white population is now 12% of the voters roll, even though we're only 7% of the voters. So when you look at, let's say, Chris Pappas celebrating his huge victory there in Ngeni, because 22% white constituency managed to vote him in with like 49% of the vote. The reality is that he's got overrepresentation of white voters and underrepresentation of local black voters. And lo and behold, most districts in the area fell to MK in the following election. I mean, it's like, they're not even trying. They're not even trying to convince anyone who is mathematically literate, but because they don't have to. None of you are mathematically literate. How many of you spend time like pouring through this? I mean, it's not that you're not mathematically literate, but you don't know the numbers, right? You don't have the time in your day to take off from work and pour over these stupid documents and pick them out and then do reconstructions for missing years and so, like, in order to build a trend line. This tedious wank, okay, that you have to do is, unfortunately, because no one's got time for this, right? And so they exploit this. They exploit your ignorance. Yeah, this document is for explaining Americans. So you have this very 101 stuff, right? Where you go like, oh, okay, guys, this is like where the races are, hey? And then like this is where like, all of the people live, these are the languages they speak. It's like culture, man. Anyway, I mean, you have to explain to people. I find it funny. Like, look, the thing is, there are Americans who are stunningly intelligent, but I hate explaining to people from scratch. It's painful sometimes explaining to people from scratch, like basic 101 stuff. Like, okay, actually, we've got two completely different geographical territories. We've got like a geographical exception where the Zulus live, and then Gauteng's also weird. But I mean, you've got even the Cape. This is an interesting thing. We all know that the Cape's demographics are changing. Lots of black people coming in from the Eastern Cape. Colored people are stable. White people are stable, but it doesn't make a difference because, they're coming in. Even in the Western Cape, from 2004 until the present, all charterist parties, ANC, EFF, doesn't matter who, have been on the decline. They're now like 25% of the vote last election. Absolutely like negligible. What we have over here, though, is the DA, who's hovering at about 55%. Right? They've been up there for a while. You only need to knock a little bit of them off to change what's going on over here. Where am I going with this? Right. So those minority parties, they do have value. Those tiny little ones, they do have value, but you got to pick the one that's furthest right, and at the moment that's Freedom Front Plus, very civilized, very clean, don't like corruption. I mean, look, when they catch someone who's even accused of corruption, they put him through the ringer and kick him out. They did that a couple of months ago. So, I mean, for me, it's more important how they handle these things than whether they happen at all, because they're gonna happen. Human beings are gonna do human shit. How do you deal with it? You kick the people out. Right? If they steal, you kick them out. Simple. DA does not do this. Anyway. So, where does it leave us? It means we do not have any parliamentary solution. You cannot vote your way out of this unless you are in the Western Cape. You can arrest the progress if you are voting in local elections, right? You might be able to have an influence in KZN or Gauteng, but nowhere else, right? If you are outside of the three pivotal provinces, then the only place where you are going to have meaningful influence is in local elections. Okay, and even then, you have to be very cautious. All right. Now, that means one thing. That means that where power lies, or rather where power can be taken, is no longer in the parliamentary system. It is in A, the market, to what extent there's any freedom there, and B, the other. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by comments. I'll answer your questiones later. But the other thing is through civic society. So this would be just organizing outside of parliamentary politics. This means Solidarity, AfriForum, NEASA, Sakeliga, right? These guys. Free Market Foundation, also very, very good. I have my differences with my libertarian friend Martin van Staden, but he's not one of those goofy libertarians you get in the US. He's the real deal. He's dogmatic about certain points I think he should not be, but it doesn't matter. That is a sound guy, does great research. If you've ever seen that graph, if you have ever seen this graph that's been passed around the internet like a hot potato for the past however long, then you're looking at Martin van Staden's work. So he counted our race laws for the past 100 odd years. No, he's a good egg. He really is. To get back to the legislation itself, I'm going to actually read a little bit over here. So now you remember I mentioned that you've got two criteria that really hold it in place, and that's that it is where are we going? Land reform. You got two real criteria, and that's arbitrariness and court rulings. So I'm just going to read this whole section out for you, because if anyone doesn't know the big stats on like how things have been managed so far, it's all up in the air. I'm going to say the present claims drive. The present claims. What the hell? I need to go. Is that the land reform exists to empower black people and give them access to land. The 4,000 states that the state owns and leases, it currently is in possession of almost 900 unused farms, extending over approximately 700,000 hectares, which are mostly fallow or underused. Despite this, the government has no plans whatsoever to privatize these farms or distribute them back to the population. Current plans do not even include indemnity against mortgages. The dispossessed property holder will still be liable for any debt raised against the property. So yeah, do not get funny and borrow against your property from the bank. Get your debt paid away. Nobody actually gives a damn about you in this system. Nor is this the only concern. Corruption in the restitution process has allowed ANC members to evict farmers illegally, even black farmers, if their land is desirable. So let's see, where's that 38? So you can look this up. There's a guy called Majav who's writing for the Mail and Guardian. ANC family tries to run black farmers off their land. So yeah, there's a number of those stories. They often get away with this, right? So AfriForum's official comments on the report of the panel on land reform demonstrate that in order to justify the radical and absolute racialism of the legislation they aim to pass, the government has ruthlessly distorted the historical record, exaggerating claims of illegitimate settlement, being silent on the issue of the indigenous Khoisan peoples who preceded the Bantu invasions, and generally drawing an absolute Manichaean racial dichotomy. This reflects a broad hatred and dehumanizing attitude amongst those in power. The previous Deputy President David Mabuza made it clear in a public address that those white farmers who do not voluntarily give up their land will be forced to by violence. During the parliamentary debate on the Land Reform Act, the MP opening debate for the day, Dr. Matole Macheka, explained that it was unfortunate that white people were even allowed to vote, let alone hold property. This was not deemed remarkable by any member of the ruling party or the press. The core of this category of reform is the complete practical erasure of the right to property and includes the Expropriation Act, passed and assented by the President, and the Land Courts Bill, passed but not yet assented to, and it's the second one that you need to keep your eye out for. The schedule for implementing this change is not yet known, but it is now inevitable. To mention briefly, there's one aspect of the third wave BEE which touches on this matter: the new regulations for the Property Practitioners Regulatory Authority, which imposes racial requirements on the acquisition of property trading licenses. Okay, so you can't be a real estate agent unless your organization is black enough. And at present, these have been delayed while Sakalicha tries to bully them into submission. But they usually just pause these and then try and get them through later. The same can be said of the Agri-BEE regulations released on the 3rd, 4th, and 7th of October 2024 by the Director General of the Department of Agriculture, which subject reduced tariff imports and exports of agricultural products to BEE criteria, effectively banning white farmers from foreign trade. Implementation has been delayed in response to legal challenges, but have not yet been abandoned. There's also the Preservation and Development of Agricultural Land Act. I mentioned this earlier. So it gives authority to the Department of Agriculture to prohibit or mandate any activity by agricultural practitioners which they can deem harmful to development or the production capacity of the land, and impose jail sentences up to 10 years and fines up to 10 million rand on any who fail to abide by the instructions of the Minister for remedying the situation. This includes regional plans for agricultural development, which can determine crop selection. These powers can be delegated to any level of government. But these are just footnotes in a much more ambitious legal reform. The Expropriation Act allows for the expropriation of any property, whether land, cash, movable property, or corporate shares, without compensation. The justification for expropriation will be anything that is in the, quote, public interest. This raises concerns that the law will have as broad and loose an application as the process is seen in Zimbabwe and Venezuela. While many point to Section 25 of the Constitution as a potential guardrail, the only constitutional limits against expropriation without compensation is A, that it would have to be approved by a court, and B, that it is not allowed to be arbitrary. However, the arbitrariness criterion is fairly slippery, and many general purposes under the umbrella of public interests, say a public work project or just redress, that is, but a racial redress, can justifiably be considered a non-arbitrary cause. The Constitution already provides that racial discrimination is legal, so long as it is, quote, fair, which has allowed for asymmetrical enforcement of hate speech laws and aggressive and damaging racially discriminatory laws in the broader economy. While expropriation has been held up by the need to find a fair deal between landowners and the state, the new act reversed the current arrangement where court adjudication is required, and instead places the court process in the role of appeal, meaning land can be expropriated, repopulated, and repurposed before an appeal can proceed. Courts' appeal processes in South Africa are notoriously long, sometimes taking years to receive a court date, and squatters' rights are strong enough that land is often forced to be abandoned for the sake of an established squatter camp, which are entitled to replacement housing out of the landowner's pocket before eviction can begin, and usually become recognized informal settlements entitled to free government infrastructure upgrades. In the interests of finding out what the state's interpretation of the Act constitutionality is, the President's official legal counsel regarding land reform, Advocate Tembeka Ntobi, currently busy with the ICC case against Israel, has written an extensive legal opinion on the matter. The question under the Constitution is not whether expropriation without compensation is constitutionally permissible. It is. The question is when it is permissible to expropriate land without compensation. In particular, when is it constitutionally permissible to expropriate it without compensation in order to advance land reform? So, we have the Act adding another criterion. Here I mentioned Ruth Hall. I don't want to talk about her anymore. Another condition, where the market value of the land is equivalent to or less than the present value of the direct state investment or subsidy in the acquisition and beneficial capital improvement of the land. Meaning that any budgetary estimate for development which exceeds the market value of the property can be used to deny compensation. It also allows the national government to seize property from other spheres of government it deems not to be employing for its core function, empowering the minister to expropriate any property on behalf of any state entity. So let's say they don't like what some municipality or province is doing. They just say, sorry, you're done. You don't get to have that land anymore. Speculation as a criterion is also concerning development because whether any landlord will be allowed to keep their property is now entirely a matter of speculation. The moment the expropriation is signed, the ownership is transferred to the state, which can deny dispossessed owners entry to the property after 40 days notice and you'll be penalized for any failure to maintain the property during that time. So you can't salt the earth on the way out. You will be penalized for it. So most would assume, given that our courts are still more or less reasonable entities, that this cannot go too far and that the likelihood is that most victims of the state would in some way be compensated. Jurist Martin van Staden has argued that the Act is unconstitutional, primarily on the basis of reference to Fraus legis in international law. That's the idea of, you're trying your best to circumvent the law by tricksy means. Basically, Frost alleges a principle against Pharisaism in legal interpretation. I think it's an excellent idea, but in practice, he argues that the attempt to circumvent the law against unilateral expropriation without compensation remains held in check by the court system. And he's right, it does remain held in check by the court system, but only to the extent that I've so far described. Here's where it gets really nasty. So the NC has passed the Land Courts Act, and the President has not yet signed it, but let's see. The Act of Parliament establishes a new court system explicitly for the streamlining of accelerated expropriation. It will be selected directly by the Presidency, and the JSC, that's the Judicial Select Committee, will act only in an advisory capacity. It'll have equal jurisdiction to the high courts, leaving only the Supreme Court of Appeal and the Constitutional Court itself as a means of appeal. So it's narrowing, the amount of different ways you can actually get on the court roll to say, hey, my land's being taken. But these laws establish that the land will be expropriated first before any appeals process can be heard. The judges of this court will also be immune from all forms of prosecution or legal summons except for acts of domestic violence. Extraordinary clause in the Act, by the way. They literally can shoot someone in broad daylight. They're allowed to do that. Proceedings under this Act may be instituted by the Commission, any person acting in their own interest, this is who has standing under this court, any person acting on behalf of any other person who cannot act in their own name, any person acting as a member of or in the interest of a group or class of persons, any person acting in the public interest, or any association acting in the interest of its members. Literally, anyone can walk into the court and make a land claim against you for any reason. This opens the way for, witnesses and anyone who accompany them to the court will be monetarily compensated. Hearsay, and it says this in the bloody text of the bill. It's not hearsay, and documents without providence have the same weight as any official document or testimony. The court may, do you understand what this is, my friends? Like, who is looking at this and saying it's okay? Anyone who does this to you, they are not just lying, they are malicious liars that want to destroy you. How are we not shining a light on this? This has been passed by Parliament. It's sitting on the President's desk. He signs this tomorrow. I don't know when he's going to sign it. He might sort of be waiting for an opportune moment. But once this is signed, there is no recourse under the law for anything that anyone does to any item of your property. It's over. The court may, in the case of claims under the Restitution of Land Rights Act, admit evidence, including oral evidence, which it considers relevant and cogent to the matter being heard by it, whether or not such evidence would be admissible in any other court of law. Without derogating from the generality of subsection 1, it is competent for any party before the court to adduce hearsay evidence regarding the circumstances surrounding the dispossession of a land right or rights and the rules governing the allocation and occupation of land within a claimant community at the time of such dispossession, and B, expert evidence regarding the historical and anthropological facts relevant to any political land claim. The court must give such weight to any evidence adduced in terms of subsections 1 or 2 as it deems appropriate. Whenever a judgment, order, or other record of the court is required to be proved or inspected or referred to in any manner, a copy of such judgment under its seal may evidence, therefore, without proof of the authenticity of such registrar's signature. Additionally, the court will have the right to deny the submission of any evidence if it wishes. It will speed up the process and reduce cost. And so there are no meaningful recourses possible once this process is implemented in full. You guys, I just don't get this. Like, how is anyone under the illusion that what is happening now is normal? So what do you do about it? Well, if you're not now a member of like a neighborhood watch association, you better get moving, because this is about to get, happen. Firearms licenses, very, very good idea. We, stick to the letter of the law at the moment, as much as you can. You don't want to try cause any trouble for yourself before you have to. So basically, get on and get organized. And I mean, anyone who tells you that they're going to hide out in the bush and wait this out, they're being very silly. You cannot resist this kind of stuff without being organized. So you have to get organized. Whether it's with Solidarity or AfriForum or any other organization, get organized. The real question here is what is going to be decided for most of us, like in all times in all history, is likely going to be decided behind closed doors. To what extent you can trust people is, I mean, there's so many layers of remove. I am only 1 degree removed from, decision makers in the Solidarity movement, because, well, I have contacts with them. I can ask them questions if I want, I won't be in the room when they make decisions, and I can't tell them what to do, because I'm just little old me, Mr. Researchy guy. But yeah, I'd say they're trustworthy. They know what they're doing. There's a degree of risk aversion that has prevailed until very recently, but now the people who want to do stuff are the ones who have the answers in the room. And so what is going on here is that we're facing a sort of Rubicon moment. Now, whether or not the United States decides to do something drastic or not, something's got to change, because the magnifying glass is on us. But you want to pay attention to the people who are defending this bill now and pushing back against Trump, because you're going to, when things start burning, those are the people you've got to keep your eye out for. Because they're going to be happy. They are going to be happy for the security you provide, but they are going to be equally happy to undermine you if they feel they have to. One of the biggest problems you're going to encounter in neighborhood watches is liberal types who are going to undermine every effort you make at actually dealing with security threats. And I don't mean being brutal at all. People who will, nickel and dime you into and nitpick every sort of fine point of your procedure for apprehending a criminal or a threat, so that they make it impossible for you to conduct business. You got to watch out for those people. It's, conduct yourself with decorum. Don't be excessive. Be focused. Zen. Don't. It's equally dangerous for a different reason to get involved with people who have an extremist mentality, the edgy types who want to be the big man, who want to do this. There's no time for that, because those people will get you screwed. They'll get you taken out. The point is, you got to follow the guys who are organized and mature and level-headed. Those are the guys you need, because what's coming is there's going to be many years in which there's a sort of long standoff, and for a long time, probably for about a decade, it's going to be a situation where every now and again there'll be some incident which threatens civil war, and you don't know when it's going to pop off, and you don't know what it's going to look like, and everyone's going to be on tenterhooks, and everyone's going to have to be constantly vigilant. Is this land invasion happening? Is that land invasion happening? What's going on? Is this place safe? Is that place safe? Because it's actually going to be a lot slower than people reckon, but it's now on. And I think that the ability to secure territory is vitally important now. And I mean, some of my recommendations that I've made to the movement at times are helping people organize trusts for making contiguous territory across a town, so that it's, you control all of the land inside it as private property. I mean, they can try and expropriate that shit, but, who would take it? You have to have big enough conurbations, and then you have to fortify them with various means. That last part is not that hard. I mean, we already have enough organization and training in general amongst the population. The question is these coordinating factors. Can you create contiguous territorial units here and there, little enclave? And that's a paperwork issue. That's a herding people issue. You got a lot of people who resist these measures for various reasons, but they're very, very silly people, because without that kind of territorial control, you're in trouble. There's some of the interesting moves the Jewish community in Johannesburg has made, which are very smart. And they set up these security companies, because ordinary people are not allowed to carry automatic weapons, but you can if you are certified as under the private security regulations, PSERA. So what they do is they set up a private security company obeying the absolute minimum requirements of the law, which is like you got to have a place you can use an office, telephone, desk, filing cabinet, weird stuff like that. And then you employ the local neighborhood watch at like $1 each. They use that shell company to get the requisite certifications, and then your local neighborhood watch is now armed with semi-automatic rifles. This is a very innovative way that people sort of deal with issues. So, look, there are a lot of ways people can organize and get their things sorted, get their little lives sorted out. And I think you're going to see it increasingly looking good nowadays. The government's not going to get more efficient. The military's not going to get more efficient. The police are not going to get more efficient. Home Affairs and SARS are going to get more efficient. But at a certain point, the big problem is the banks. So they're going to get forced. They're going to increasingly get the cooperation of the bank, so they can take your money straight out of your bank account without asking for it, right? So that means your alternative options will be, again, things like Bitcoin. My late friend Vian was part of an organization called Money Badger that's sort of looking to make it more sort of useful on the high street. What the hell is NHW? Sorry, Defender Prima, you said something, I should do consulting for NHW. Who's that? Helen Zilla is South African. She is part of the problem, I think, because she's either deluded or, okay with what's happening. There are a lot of white South Africans who do get on board with that security unit tech, with various kind of a neighborhood watch. You know what? My personal experience in getting involved is that we're unfortunately we're in an area where there are not a lot of people involved with neighborhood watches, because it's like rural Western Cape, sort of urban fringe of a small town. There are very few break-ins, even in the worst times. It's like, getting people a motivation to go and get involved is hard. There's farm watchers around here who do very good work, are very efficient. Is South Africa better today than it was 10 years ago? It's almost exactly the same, actually. It's worse in a lot of ways, infrastructure and so on, but there's a lot of the statistical indicators have sort of stagnated. So it's more or less like everything's kind of stayed the same, and then everything's gotten a bit more expensive, and then the infrastructure's gotten shitter. Homicide rate's more or less the same. Most things like that are about the same. So it's, I mean, one of the things, everyone talks about crime, but the reason I'm talking about these units is not because, we're under present danger of being hurt. It's because you need to actually have a group of people who are ready to deploy at a moment's notice in case of a land invasion or in case of the police coming to enforce some court order. If they come to take your private property, you've got to be willing to tell them to leave, even if it means confrontation, because this is the red line now. You cannot allow an inch, and it doesn't mean be enemies with the local police. In fact, it means you must be friends with them, have a chat with the guys. They're not all bad. They just have a job to do. So be nice to the police, be organized. What was the slogan of the first Japanese modern police service? It was like something like always be popular, always be smart and popular, or something like that. Popular was important. It's like, don't, everyone must respect what you're doing. So the point is that there will be points of confrontation, physical confrontation, that you're going to have to watch out for. You probably aren't getting involved in them. It'll probably happen somewhere on the other side of the country, but it'll have an impact, and everyone is going to sort of be on tenterhooks every time. If anyone can remember what it was like when Senekal was popping off, the first time that Afrikaners got rowdy at a protest ever in the New South Africa. Yeah, people were worried there was going to be civil war, and there very nearly was. There were snipers planted on rooftops. There was all kinds of crazy things that could have gone wrong in that situation, but fortunately didn't. So yeah, be wary for a long period of confrontation and attrition, and the thing is that the other side will have a lot of advantages in this. And I am concerned that we can only play a defensive stance for now. And this is worrying, because if we cannot make offensive moves at some point in the future, we are going to keep retreating. And it's not just security issues that need to be concerned about. It's, local service issues. Can you replace government services? That's very important. AfriForum and Solidarity have done really great work there, replacing firefighting services now. They're handling water reticulation soon. No, they're really on top of it. And I mean, places like Orania, by my estimate, there are maybe 3, at a real stretch 4 places you can put a new Orania and have a major positive impact by putting it there. But it is going to be difficult. So yeah, I mean, it's these little communities are the ones that you can defend, whether they're in existing territory or whether they're in a new territory, whether they'll come up in numbers or whether we're looking at the limit of it now. We're going to grit our teeth for the next 5 to 10 years. Options for Cape Independence are very slim, but they're way better now than they were last year, because the DA has massively, massively shot themselves in the foot. Let me just deal with those guys quickly. Every single message coming out of the DA the past day has been, go away, Donald Trump. You don't know what you're talking about. Everything's fine here. Nothing can go wrong. Please leave the process alone. We don't need your help. We don't need anyone's help. The DA are handling it. Yeah. So they just spent their political capital defending expropriation without compensation. This is where we're at. Do not blink. The DA really has to be completely dismantled. As far as I'm aware, I only know of 3 people in the party who I regard as decent and trustworthy. That would be Cilliers Brink, Ian Cameron, and Michael Waters. Everyone else, as far as I'm concerned, really should be completely jettisoned. It's not to say that there aren't talented people in the party. But very importantly, there are no people who will be loyal to their constituents. They are more loyal to their careers. They are more loyal to the idea of South Africa, which in itself is a perversion. Jordan Hill-Lewis is very left-wing, yes. His PR agent is an EFF supporter, as it turns out, the lady who handles his public relations. I mean, look, he is talented. He's not completely, he's not a buffoon. He does show up and do his job. But he is not trustworthy. He's a left-winger. He's a left-winger. And the thing is, left and right used to be a matter of shades of gray, but on this issue, it's black and white. Are you on the left of this issue or are you on the right? And that line is, are you going to do everything within your power to reverse this, to empower people to reverse the situation, to defend our rights and so on? Do you advocate for the defense of our communities and our rights by any means necessary? Or do you not? And if the answer is, well, no, not by any means necessary. I mean, if it's necessary and we don't like doing it, we won't do it. Well, then you're on the left and you need to go. I think that this is a very simple equation. The DA is more or less powerless to change the ANC's position on things. I think that is much as obvious. But they can provide extraordinary political cover for any acts of resistance just by being the biggest opposition party and offering unequivocal support. That may not sound like much, but it's an enormous psychological milestone. If they cannot do that, and if they cannot do everything that they possibly can within their power, whether it's legal, illegal, plausibly deniable, doesn't matter. If they're not willing to do everything that's in their power, civil disobedience, they've got a massive activist network across the country with millions, billions of rands in their pockets. They could be doing all kinds of things, but they're sitting on their hands and saying, please, Mr. Ramaphosa, will you please be polite to us? We really think we deserve respect. No, you don't deserve respect. It's politics. These people are not your loved ones. They do not give respect by default. They give respect when you demand it, when you enforce it. There's politics. So, I mean, I'm saying, no more decay, stop the decay, stop it all now, no more tolerance. Don't vote for the DA because this is controlled decline. You know what it makes me think of a bit is the Labour Party. Because the Labour Party in the UK don't really care how unpopular they're becoming. It's they just plow through it regardless. And they say, we're not leaving power, we're not compromising on anything, it doesn't matter how unpopular our program is, we're going to do it. So the DA is much like that. I mean, Helen Zille doesn't care what anyone thinks unless it's going to affect her ability to do what she wants, which, fair enough, that's an empowered political position to operate from. And that's why she's effective. But what she wants, she has explained very clearly, is the irrelevance of a nation state, the irrelevance of ethnicity. Every policy and decision should really be decided by targets set overseas in the UN General Assembly, in the hidden committees of this vast and unaccountable bureaucracy overseas. And so this is what the DA has been working towards. It's why they have the UN Sustainable Development Goals as their primary manifesto. They don't have any value unless they change. And if they don't change, they must be destroyed. This is my very firm opinion, I'm afraid. But regarding security, I want you guys to all relax a little bit on one particular issue. So obviously defending the land is going to be a very, very, very important issue. But if you're worried about your personal safety, there's something that allows you to take a bit of heart here. Some time ago, there was an epidemiological study on South African homicide rates. As most of you may know, the state does not publish racial stats for crime. So what this means is that we don't know the race of crime victims at a national level. But that's what the epidemiological study is for. You take a nice, good sample size of all of the crimes committed at as many police stations as you can possibly process within your project and time frame, and you look at it. You say what the rates are. Now, it turns out South Africans, I can't remember the numbers for the other racial groups, but South Africans have a homicide rate of 3 per 100,000. Now, that's equivalent with Estonia, right? Estonia has that homicide rate. Very, very peaceful. And we're also the only group that is more likely to be killed by strangers than acquaintances or loved ones. Now, if you take away the deaths, the homicides of white victims that are committed by strangers, then we have a homicide rate of 0.03, possibly the lowest homicide rate in the world. And so the way to think about this is we are very safe because we have become very good at avoiding the problems in South Africa. This study is from 2022, so it's very fresh. This is the situation we live in. We are actually okay because we are smart and we are capable of surviving here. We know what we are doing. Do not get afraid. Get organized. Get busy. Because your life, this is the problem. Everybody in the country who is a bit liberal, a bit bien pensant will say, we're doing fine. Look at me. I don't get attacked. Nobody's doing anything to me. I live kind of okay. Well, that's because we know how to survive. We're competent people. Okay, we're a competent minority group. We're successful. Even with all of our privileges taken away, even with the equality of rights taken away, we are very successful. Let us not underestimate ourselves. So what I will say here, the complacency is what you must fight. Do not think that the situation cannot be taken away from you. That these conditions cannot be reversed. They can be if you do nothing. And so it's the reverse of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe everything is fine, it soon won't be. If you believe that everything is in danger, it soon won't be. Right? So as long as people are, wary enough to place their attitudes in a serious and competent place, do not fear, but have a reasonable thought about the risks. If you can get your property in the hands of a trusted person overseas, or perhaps if you have foreign citizenship, get your create and put some entity overseas and place it in your name there. That's one of the best ways that you can hide your property from now, is according to the advice of Tembeka Ntobi, who is the president's advisor on the legality of land reform. So this is the thing. We can be fine. We can be fine. One of the worries would be that, Trump is too heavy-handed, and then ANC overreacts in the opposite direction. We already had Gwede Mantashe threatening to cut off Western access to our mineral markets. Not smart, or Twereke stupid. But I think things will be okay. We are going to be able to talk to the solidarity and so on. We're going to be talking to the Americans shortly. and we will see how that turns out. I think one of the big problems here is, as you can see from the point that I've stopped on over here, we are incredibly vulnerable. Look at that. Employment standing. This is an old stat. This stat is a couple of years old. Employment sitting at 46, according to the broad definition, which includes unemployed people who are not looking for a job. And around the same number receive some form of welfare grant. So, and then you've got about 5% of the population paying 92% of all income tax. And it's, you only need to remove about a quarter to a third of income tax as a proportion of the whole in order to collapse our government and trigger a complete fiscal disintegration. So we could do that. It would be difficult to do that. I don't recommend a tax revolt just now. What you can do is you can cripple the authority by launching, broad appeals and so on. But that's another question. It remains to be seen. Maybe the Onschreibers, are going to figure out, and Kieswetter are going to figure out how to streamline all of the national bureaucracy and make it very easy for the ANC to govern. I hope not. But so there's murders, and then we have problems with police selling guns at large, skills deficit, brain drain, blackouts. Yeah, Eskom's back to its old business. I had a look at a little section here on land invasions, but I don't need to read the whole report to you. I just thought the old land invasion report is interesting because if you look at, you can look at, housing types. Oh, wait, actually, there is one stat that was on that document, which I included in that old document, which I found thanks to the help of a guy, I think his name is Kyle Findley. He runs something called Superlinear. It's a really good stats blog. He looked at stats of house ownership, and white people only own 35% of. No, let me get the stats right because that's actually important. Let me see if I can find where was I? Documents. So you can find that because. There we go. Okay, schools. Why the schools are shit. That number 35 comes up often enough. Material and social conditions. Blah blah blah. BBB, Charterhouse, land invasions. It's nearly here. Economic inequality. So a lot of people talk about the balance of equality. I'm actually going to read this out to you because. Now, there is a prima facie case to be made. There's a prima facie case to be made that about our sort of racial inequality. You can see here, and I deliberately included this so that there's a bit of balance here. Yes, if you look at median incomes, then the proportional discrepancy between white and black in South Africa and white and black in the United States is actually roughly the same. This is medians, right? Hasn't been corrected by 60 years of affirmative action in the United States. Hasn't been corrected by 30 years in South Africa. It's where it is. But what's important is the balance of weight in the economy, and it's shifted over to black people in around 2013. They sort of took the lead there. And I'll explain this, right? So while the latest figures are not publicly available, by 2013, the balance of black and white owned shares in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange was roughly equal, with 23 being black owned, 22 being white-owned, 16% unknown, and the remainder being foreign-owned. So already 12 years ago, black people had cleared that 50-50 mark of ownership of the domestic economy. According to Helen Suzman's foundational analysis of the wealth inequality indicators from the 2011 census, unfortunately such data is not publicly available from the latest census, the difference in median incomes is almost entirely explicable by the vast increase in inequality within black South Africa rather than a preservation of white dominance. There's also almost unrivaled levels of socioeconomic mobility. People who are rich are getting poor and vice versa. The oft-repeated cliches here that BEE only benefits the connected and of a labor aristocracy appear to bear out. According to the economist Mike Schussler, by 2015, black ownership of South Africa's primary residential market was perhaps as much as 60%, up from 41.7% in 2009, where white ownership was at 43.8%, colored ownership at 8.3%, and Indian at 6.2%. By 2015, black owned 52% of the value of houses in South Africa, while whites owned about 35% of the value of houses in South Africa. And then Carl Findlay showed that black South Africans are more likely to own their own property outright than any other racial group at 57%, while whites were the least likely at only 41%, suggesting a difference in the rate of full ownership versus mortgaged and rented properties. So we're in more debt trying to maintain what we have. So we would be more affected by any kind of economic shock. So this is why I hope that Donald Trump does not do anything stupid or drastic. He should be careful, or he will screw us. So what people will quote to you is the figures from 1991, when 87% of all landed property and 95% of all capital was in the hands of the white minority. But by land area, as opposed to value or units, then you get, quarter owned by the state, 34% private black ownership, and then the rest of it is farming. The black people tend to own in the most fertile farming regions. So then you look at how land claims are actually filed with the Land Rights Act. The cutoff date was reached in 1998, but the government wanted more transformation, so they invited more people to do it in 2014. Nearly 60% were for urban land. 93% of those who instituted land claims wanted money rather than land as compensation. It's acknowledged here that the stats are old. Some of the stats are old, but they aren't new ones. Part of the problem is, people not knowing exactly how, things are working. There's mass urbanization, and basically they're taking the land the empty land that we settled in the 19th century, because, look, everyone's going to twist your nipples over the empty land thesis. Oh, it's an apartheid myth. Look, it was exaggerated, but the truth of the matter is that when you have 2 million people living in a land 3 times the size of Germany has 80 million people in it. If you have 2 million people across such an enormous space of, there are plenty of places to set up settlements. And white people weren't picking places neighboring black tribes; they were picking places where they would be unmolested. It is those settlements which today are the big settlements in South Africa, which are drawing all of these urbanization waves. It is our land that is being taken, not theirs. So I think, don't feel any kind of moral guilt. Don't be afraid. Be focused. Stay put. We will be fine as long as we focus and get our act together. And don't sit and hysterically fight with everyone who doesn't know how this is working. Explain to them in the most level-headed way possible exactly what the problems are, exactly what the causes are, right? Exactly what the balance of forces are. All of this, and it will quite help. It'll quite help because look, those who will be convinced will be convinced. Those who will not be convinced will not be convinced, and then you will know who you have to watch out for in times of emergency. But fortunately, 99% of the time is not a time of emergency, and you can get on with life. Do not destroy the fabric of your social circle for the sake of frantic arguments. If you cannot convince someone, you cannot convince someone. If someone is of the right mind and the right instinct, then they are fine. So I think the thing is to just bear down, make sure you're doing well, look at ways to save your property, look at ways to protect your community, look at ways to get organized, and when you vote, make sure that you know why you're voting and where it's worth voting. Come out in the local elections where you can make a difference, and sometimes you're going to have to swallow your pride and vote DA. Sometimes they're the best ones on the ballot. It doesn't matter. It is still better than the ANC. Don't be stupid. Don't do spite voting, right? Everything. The one thing that will always, always, always ruin your interest is if you act out of spite and resentment. Always be able to say that you can, if you want to destroy the DA, do it where doing so will have a positive impact. Go and vote Vryheidsfront. Go and vote ACDP. Right? ACDP are fine. I mean, they're not radical. They're not fancy. They're not super right-wing, but they're Christians and they care about property rights and they try and govern cleanly. They're good people. Vryheidsfront Plus for me, the best way to go at the moment because they tick all the boxes. They not only support Cape independence, they also support localist movements up north. They are very, very pro-Afrikaner. They're a bit bureaucratic and they can be sort of slow-moving, but they are very sound, upright, and so on. Change of leadership potentially coming in February. I'm crossing fingers for that. If it doesn't happen, my confidence in the party will completely shift because I'm a Corné Mulder guy. That's where I stand. Referendum Party is currently the most professional organized element of the Cape Independence movement outside of the Vryheidsfront Plus, and they're the most serious. If you want to keep up to date with what they're doing, please follow Phil Craig and the Cape Independence Advocacy Group, which is the little think tank attached to the Referendum Party. Jack Miller at the Cape Independence Party, I really, really hope he comes to the table because putting those guys under one umbrella is ideal, and you need to have a legible brand at the ballot box. And if you want to appeal to the English in the Cape, you're going to have a brand separate from the Vryheidsfront, or it's not going to happen. So I really hope they find some way of pulling a Democratic Alliance move, like, NPDP kind of a move between CIP and RP. But, yeah. No. So, that covers most of the bases. Don't think you're going to win national elections. Don't think you're going to win provincial elections. Don't think you're going to radically save South Africa. South Africa is beyond saving. It is over. Okay. What you do is you save your community and you build. You build and you build. And at a certain point, you'll be able to take a little needle and prick, and the state will burst like a soap bubble. It'll still be there, it'll do its thing vaguely, but it won't affect you anymore. Their ability to enforce the law will eventually evaporate, but not without consistent effort, consistent focus, and a shift in consciousness. You cannot see yourself as being part of South Africa in the same way that you were before. You have to see yourself as being in a sense, outside. In a sense, voelvry, persona non grata. Because this is how the system treats you. And anybody who defends the system is your enemy. It's not complicated. Doesn't mean you become some sort of stupid bomb-throwing lunatic. Don't do that. No. You quietly, psychologically retire your South African citizenship. This is how you do it. Because by doing so, you put yourself in the right mindset to say no when the state does anything. But you don't make yourself of the mindset that you go, don't get romantic about Volksstaat and things. If it's not built, you can't, it's not real. Tim Beck and the Contobi, also director of Cambrian Capital Partners. Look, if you're connected, you get new connections. It's fun. Does anyone have any questions? Because I'm not going to hang around for very long. I'm going to make a cup of tea, and then I'm going to write stuff. Who wants questions? I'm going to hang out for a bit longer. Let's scroll up, because I know some people asked some questions earlier on. Also talking about the Open Society Foundation. Yeah, they're very influential in South Africa. They've been around for a long time. But I think what you guys have to bear in mind, and Johnny Vedmore is someone you need to look up. So he wrote a big article on the origins of the WEF and what their role is in the American Empire. So we've had a changing of the guard in the American Empire for the first time since Franklin Roosevelt. This means that all of these old systems are going to be gently unplugged, although some of them will remain sticky. And that means that there's what you want to see the big four. They used to be called the big three until Open Society came around. Carnegie, Ford, Rockefeller, Open Society. There's another one whose name escapes me, called something Philanthropies. But all of these are they're funded by the CIA and various affiliates of the CIA, and they use them for laundering operations and for laundering money, right? These are big charitable organizations, and they are branches of American foreign influence. So they fund all kinds of political parties, NGOs. People fixate on the OSF. They are not the problem. They are just the most arrogant vanguard of the problem. It's the previous American administration's influence campaigns, and hopefully Tulsi Gabbard will be digging into those and start unplugging stuff. So, the World Economic Forum was set up by Henry Kissinger. He picked up Klaus Schwab from his Harvard lecture system, which was used for recruiting elites. And he wanted to set up a similar forum in Europe to help recruit European elites to guide and steer the process of European unification in American interests, which has been successful. It now sort of operates as a center of global governance coordination. It doesn't set the policy. It sets the agenda for talking about the policies. What are the things that the elites need to pay attention for are decided at Davos. But it's the Americans and the American security state and so on who are setting sort of the tone for all of this. It's downstream of American power, and it will change as American power changes, right? Doesn't mean America's not going to project its influence anymore. It means that it's going to change in nature, and it is still going to have reasons to differ from your interest. Do not forget that. Don't think Trump is your friend just because you have aligned interests. He is a potential ally, not your bosom buddy, not your father. Okay? He is a potential ally. Don't get starry-eyed. Okay? Comparisons with Zimbabwe, yes. Profits, blah, blah, blah. No question marks here, blah, blah, blah. X account. Yes, I have an X account. The ratio of the rest has changed. Don't think we see what you're showing. Blah, 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 blah. Oh my goodness. I saw a poll about who South Africans would vote for in the US election if they could. The most common response wasn't aware there was an election. Yeah, it's great. We live in splendid isolation. It really is great. Yeah. Can any South African tell have been any firefight skirmishes between Afrikaners and ANC army enforcers? No, I don't think so. I think we largely obey the law. PMCs, they're right, are they're not private military companies. They're private security companies. They do neighborhood watches. They do warehouse security. They do transport security. They are very well armed. They are very tough guys, but they are not coordinated. They are privately owned. Fortunately, they're not allowed to be majority owned by foreign companies. I don't know if that's fortunate or unfortunate. It depends which way the wind blows now. But yeah, these people do outnumber South African. The private security does outnumber state security, and they are certainly a resource for future times. Okay, lots of comments without questions. Padfoot asks, what will happen to national safari parks like Kruger when the owners are white but the staff are black? That's already more or less the case. It's not the end of the world. Things still sort of tick over. It's when the management becomes taken over and drawn into ruling party circles that things really start falling apart. So here are problems. One question I have is, will South Africa stop trading golds and diamonds with America as well? We have had this suggested by Gwede Montashe, who's still got a lot of clout in the ANC. I hope he's not that stupid. That would be really, really, really stupid. Very, very stupid. Comments about the UK Labour Party. William over here is mentioning US aid and Catholic charities and UN organizations, as well as an Israeli NGO pushing 22 million or so illegal immigrants into the USA. It's probably similar in the UK, although the UK has all of these quangos, quasi-non-governmental organizations. I mean, that's actually the right name for what these NGOs that are state-sponsored, because state-sponsored NGOs it's a misnomer. Quango is actually the right term. It's just it's only used in British sort of policy circles, unfortunately. Quasi-non-governmental. We're talking about European migration. Sorry, I'm not going to solve that problem for you guys right now. I mean, I think everyone already knows all the dimensions of that stuff now. No one needs to hear it being talked about. Just, we know it's bad. Make sure that you support people who actually want to solve the problem and can be trusted. That's it, really. Will South Africa stop trading with America? No, it won't. There's no way it can. Right. So, we are pretty much done. No one has any questions, so I'm going to knock off. I think I've covered enough. Thanks for checking in. Bye.